So in this video, I'm gonna go over like physical audio formats in history, specifically ones that were like available, ones that you could buy in a store. Basically, if you couldn't buy it in a store, I'm not gonna include it. If it was mostly used for just recording audio, I'm not gonna include that either. So mostly mainstream physical audio formats. So it's not gonna be a very long list. And I'm gonna start from newest to oldest. So first one is Blu-ray, high fidelity pure Blu-ray audio, which was introduced after the Blu-ray format was introduced in 2006. Never really gained a lot of popularity. This allowed you to play back multi-channel audio and in high bit rates, high sample rate. There were some benefits to this. You didn't need a special player. Any Blu-ray player could play it. So that was a plus it had going for it. But I think the market had already spoken when it came to like audio. Everybody wants convenience. By this time, a lot of people already had music, MP3s. People already had their iPods. People already had music on their phones. People always choose convenience over like high sound quality or multi-channel audio. I'm gonna put this in as an F tier one. It's just not. It did not make really deep market penetration. It was released in a time when people had already decided that they wanted convenience over sound quality or multi-channel audio. Things have kind of changed a little more recently now that Tidal and Apple Music and other streaming formats, Spotify, are now offering immersive audio formats like at Dolby that take advantage of Dolby Atmos. That's kind of making a splash, but again, I think these new formats do have the convenience factor that people are looking for. But again, most people just want to listen to music in 2-channel audio, maybe in their headphones or on their phone. So again, F tier for the Blu-ray audio. Next we have, there's two of them. I'm going to start with DVD audio. DVD audio, I'm going to say, is D tier. There are a couple of reasons for this. For one, it didn't really make a big, it didn't penetrate the market very much. It wasn't very popular. It did offer multi-channel audio in higher bit rates and higher sample rates, which was good. But you couldn't just use a regular DVD player to play these things. You needed a specialized player to do it, which costs money, and people don't want to go out of their way to play their music. They had CDs, or they were playing records or playing cassettes, and they were happy with that. Then we had the popularity of MP3s, iTunes, and that basically did the format in. Same goes for Super Audio CD. I'm going to give it a leg up. I'm going to call this a C tier format because it uses like a more novel approach to digital music, which more emulates the sound of analog audio, which uses a 1-bit and very high sample rate. It's supposed to give you a more warmer sound. It did offer multi-channel music as well. I'm going to give it a tier up. It's a dead format, but there's still a lot of diehard fans that still collect these and play them all the time. So I would say that the Super Audio CD is definitely a higher tier over DVD audio. So next we have MiniDisc. I'm going to go MiniDisc is also D tier. Okay, so there are a couple of reasons for this. For one, this was a lossy format. It wasn't lossless audio. I mean, it used psychoacoustics, very similar to like MP3 and stuff. It used this like proprietary compression system called A-Track. And basically this did the same thing as MP3s and just compresses everything down. I believe the bitrate was like in the 290 range, 292 or something like that. So it was probably imperceptible to most people and still very high quality music. But again, it was lossy. Probably one of the bigger benefits of this format was that it was a recordable format, and it had the same playback length of CDs, which is awesome. I mean, it had recordability. It had decent audio quality, definitely, and it had a very small, compact form factor. Even though it came like in a cassette sort of like cartridge, so it was like a disc spinning in a cartridge. I guess the death nail on this was the advent of the CDR, which I'm not going to include in this tier list, but CDRs became more popular, they became cheaper, the burners became cheaper, and CDRs played in any CD player. So there was a ton of hardware that could play CDRs, putting the death nail into a mini disc. So next is the compact disc. So this is going to be my first God tier physical audio format. It was released in 1982. I think like everything like happened the same thing. Everything was going digital at the time. It had lossless audio. It had very long playback of 74 and 80 minutes. So you didn't have to get up and like change size of the record. It was a compact format. It penetrated the market heavily. People really embraced the format, and it's still the, along with vinyl, which has made a huge resurgence. You can buy any record on CD still, and you can't do that for any other format really, other than vinyl records, which like I said, have made a big resurgence. So I still buy CDs because I like to support artists. When I do really like an album, I try to buy it. I go out of my way and I really support the artist, and I try to do that. So a lot of times CDs are cheaper than vinyl records. You can still support the artist, and it's usually half as much. Another thing to note that this is the highest quality format that ever made its way into a car. Now most cars are moving away from the CD slot, and people even use them to hold their phones. So, and I think CDs are going to make a resurgence similar to vinyl one day. I may be wrong, but I think they're going to become cool. Kids are going to become curious about it, and want to know more about it. And this shiny disc can play music, really really high quality music. And I think it might be cool, just like the cassette and the vinyl records that kind of made a resurgence. So next up on the list we have 8-track. I'm gonna put this in B tier. There might be a little bit of a misconception. Maybe a lot of people think that 8-track was released before regular, compact cassettes, but that's not the case. 8-track was released in 1965. The compact cassette was developed in 1962. So it's actually a little newer. And this used a infinite loop type of technology. So it had just one roll of tape, and it had 8 tracks, so you could have 8 songs on it. I'm putting this in B tier because this is basically the first format that made its way in the car. So which probably aided in its popularity in the market. I mean, before that, most people just you just listen to AM or FM radio, and that's all you had. The 8-track, allowed you to, jam out to your tunes in your car, and play whatever you want. It did have about a 45-minute capacity, or about 40-minute capacity, so it had a decent amount of capacity. Like the name implies, it only had 8 tracks, so you could play 8 songs on it. There were some developments with the format. There was a quadraphonic version of the 8-track put out later on, but that actually reduced the amount of tracks to 4 that it could hold, basically taking its playtime down to 20 minutes or so. So again, I'm gonna put this is definitely a B tier, I think, just due to the fact that you can, due to this popularity in cars in the early days. So next up is the compact cassette. This is an A tier. Definitely. This format was probably one of the biggest reasons for the downfall of 8-track. It had higher capacity. It was actually more reliable. 8-track had a lot of reliability issues when where the tape would get all out of whack and stuff, because probably had something to do with the design, the infinite loop design. It just was more prone to messing up. So the cassette was better in that regard, even though the cassette did have its problems with tape, getting all out of whack, and then you'd have to wind it all up again. The compact cassette, it had its size. It was smaller than the 8-track. It had probably similar audio qualities, sounded similar. It made its way into the car, and the cassette was basically the first format that made its way into your pocket in the form of the Walkman, and portable cassette players and boom boxes. It just became a cultural phenomenon, so to speak. And again, they're making a resurgence now these days. People are feeling nostalgic for the cassette. I should say that Dolby developed a bunch of noise reduction that helped with the hissing, and the hissing that you would get with playing back a cassette. And more recently, I think there was like Dolby B, Dolby A, Dolby B, Dolby C, and then Dolby S was the last one. It actually made it sound almost digital, but you needed to record it was mostly used in recording. I think there were some pre-recorded Dolby S tapes, but you needed proprietary hardware to play them back to take advantage of Dolby S. And yeah, it sounded really good, but again, when you ask people to buy proprietary hardware to play back something, it's just not going to take off. And again, the cassette was eventually overtaken by the CD. Okay, so next up we got the 45. This I'm going to put in B tier. This obviously had a lot of the qualities, had very similar qualities to the LP record. I guess some of the drawbacks were, obviously, it limited in capacity. It had a maximum play time of 4 minutes per side, so you got 2 songs per record. You needed a special adapter in the middle of it. Obviously, the hole is way bigger, so you need a special adapter to play them back. And obviously, you needed a record player that could play at 45 RPM. And I'm sure most players could do that, but I would say that the 45 was important because it was like the most accessible way to start a music collection. Similarly to how we now buy like individual tracks on iTunes or something, it was a very similar concept. Let's say you just wanted the popular song. You didn't want to buy the whole record. You didn't want to spend more money to buy the whole LP. You could pay a fraction of the cost, buy the single, and just get the song that you wanted. And that was the whole it was probably great for teenagers that didn't have a lot of money. You could go out and buy the record with your allowance or whatever, and you buy the single and listen to it. There were also some issues. I have a couple of 45s, and they're pretty flimsy little records, so the durability isn't really there, but they still play just fine. Again, definitely a B tier format. It was a solid format for its time. Next up is the reel-to-reel format. This really didn't gain a lot of popularity. I know you could buy the reel-to-reel pre-recorded records and stuff. I think it was mostly used for recording in the recording industry, but you could buy them pre-recorded. I'm gonna put it in the F tier because it was not a very convenient format. You had to it had a very proprietary way of actually feeding the tape onto the reel-to-reel itself, onto the machine. I wouldn't call it a very user-friendly format. It wasn't as simple as taking a record and putting it on a record player and putting the needle on the record. There was a little more to it. It wasn't a very accessible format, so I'm just going to leave it at that. It was just not a very good format for the mainstream consumer. Okay, so next up we got the 33 RPM LP. This definitely a god tier record. This is technology that has been around for over 100 years now. So it's definitely withstood the test of time. There are other iterations of the phonographic record, which have been around for over 100 years. Some came in tubular form. Others were discs that just played back faster, which I'm going to go into a little more detail down here. But the LP had everything. It had high quality. It had relatively good, solid playback time. I have records that are pushing about almost 60 minutes, 55 minutes or so. That you can pack a decent amount of music. Obviously, you're going to have the grooves a little closer, so the fidelity won't be as good as a shorter record. So probably that's why the sweet spot for LP is about 40 to 45 minutes, and that gets you really good quality sound. Especially on a new record, nice, clean, and well cared for record. They sound really good. Also, you had the advent of stereo sound, so you had stereo, they had playback capacity, and you had very deep market penetration. So a lot of people bought records, and it's a format that's still going on to this day. So this is easily a god tier format. I still buy records myself. I still have a bunch of old records. I have some records that are from the 50s that play back, they don't play back perfectly, but you play them back and they sound pretty good. So next up we got the 78 RPM record, and they came in different sizes. There were 7 inchers, 10 inchers, and 12 inchers. They were called 78s because they were played back at 78 RPM. I think this is an incredibly important format. It was one of the first mainstream formats that you could go out to store and buy and play pre-recorded music in your home. It was incredibly important. There were some huge drawbacks. Number one, a lot of these records were pretty fragile, made of not all of them, but in some cases, they were made of materials that could easily break. They were pretty fragile, but I think the biggest drawback to this format was the playback time. I think each side was about 3 minutes, and these were big records, so they were, 10 or 12 incher. We're talking maybe some of these were pushing 5 minutes in length per side. So to get a whole album on a whole, let's say 40-minute album, you needed 4 records or so. And that is a big inconvenience. Maybe back in the day, it was such a modern marvel that people were okay with that. With the advent of the LP, which brought playback time to a much more practical, like 40 minutes, 45, even 55 minutes in some cases. You could even push it to like 80 minutes or so if you were like spoken word kind of content. Then yeah, definitely. This is definitely a format that was very important for physical audio. That's my list. Please comment below. See if you agree with me, disagree with me, whatever. It's all good. Comments are great. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, or you comment however you like. If you have a different opinion, I'm gonna leave a link of my tier list if you want to take a stab at it yourself on tiermaker.com. Please give a thumbs up to the video if you found it at all entertaining, and I'll see you in the next one.